Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. Again, we're privileged a second time to have Ernie Jimenez with us, hospital corpsman, served with the Marines. We're going to get into some of that today, and really looking forward to it. And really appreciative of having him join us, share his story. The more veterans we get talking, I think the better and more interesting everything is for all of us. And getting down an oral history in some ways. Before we get back into Ernie's story, I just want to make an advertisement. I'm going to be doing this more and more as we go. I talked to Patrick about it a little bit. I want to make plugs for foundations and veterans organizations that are helping veterans recover operator syndrome, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, all the stuff that we're dealing with as a collective group. Um, so and I'm in upcoming episode, I'm going to be interviewing Steve Brown, who was a dev group operator who now has a place called Camp Brown Bear here in Kentucky, not far from me. I just went out to hang with him a little while ago. He does retreats for husbands and wives, really cool, laid back place. But we'll be talking to Steve in person. The one I wanted to just throw a plug out to today is called allsecurefoundation.org. I listened to a couple hours of this gentleman's, the gentleman who founded it. His name is Tom Satterley. He was the Army Special Mission Unit operator, 25 years in the Army, Silver Star, 4 Bronze Stars. He was on the team that captured Saddam Hussein, and Saddam Hussein actually spit in his face.
Wow.
So pretty rare individual there, but a real hero. And their organization, and you can find it at just simply Google allsecurefoundation.org. They offer all kinds of networking, couples retreats, ways to help everybody decompress, and most of it's paid for. So the foundation provides the resources. I don't know about travel, but they've got a lot going on, and I just wanted to shout out kudos to Tom Satterley and his organization. So yeah, with that, we'll get back into Ernie's story. So so we talked about your entry into the Navy, kind of your training, your corpsman training. And if you're just listening this for the first time, go back and catch the last episode so you can see how we got to where we're going to take off today. But for those who may not have caught that first episode, I just want to say that for those, because we have a lot of civilian listeners who may not know this, hospital corpsman in the Navy is a medic, right? So that's the term that would be used in the Army. But corpsmen serve a lot of different functions. Actually, I was thinking about it a whole lot. I think they even serve the Coast Guard, don't they?
No, they've I think I'm not sure when they did, but they branched up. They're actually I think
Uh-huh.
they're called HSs in the
Okay.
Coast Guard, but
Okay.
similar function.
Okay. I think once upon a time they did actually serve
Yeah,
the
it might have
Coast
been
Guard.
recently.
Yeah, the Coast Guard went through a big shift where they broke from the U.S. military to Homeland Security. And there,
There it
there was a
is.
big shift that went on with, authority and chain of command and all that. But in any case, the bigger point is that corpsmen, Navy corpsmen, also are the medics for the Marine Corps. So they're field medics. I mean, they go on patrol, they fight, they carry. It's not like a surgical hospital. Now, some of them serve in surgical hospitals, but a lot of corpsmen go out with the foot soldiers and on patrol. So they're combat medics. That's an important distinction. So I thought I'd throw the first thing out. As always, two Navy guys talking, we come up with like interesting. Oh wow, this is interesting about the culture of things that are going on, one way or the other. And Ernie was telling me that he had two enlistments, a first and a second, and about a real change he saw with respect to the way the Marine, kind of the way the synergy of how the Marines and the Navy corpsmen work together. So why don't you take it away from that? I found that really interesting.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, when I first checked in, on my combat deployment to Afghanistan, we were very much considered, despite basically the only thing Navy about us was our name tapes and our dress uniform, really. Uh,
Right.
we were expected to wear Marine Corps regs as far as hair. Um, the service uniforms, we actually are I think us and chaplains
Uh-huh.
are the only ones authorized to wear. We can choose to wear the Marine Corps service uniforms. Um, with
The
the
alphas.
yeah, alphas and the Charlies, the khaki shirt and the
Yeah.
green pants. And
Yeah.
I remember like some of my instructors did that when I was in the training pipeline, and um, it was really big, I would say, in 2010, and like 2008, 2009, like when I was during my first enlistment. Um, and it was very like oorah, Semper Fi, like Marine Corps culture, like
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
You were expected to uphold a rifleman's billet in a squad, whichever squad you were with, as well as your corpsman billet. Like you were expected to
Yeah.
maintain that knowledge. Um, if anything, you were like more was expected of you, because you kind of a leadership billet in a way as the corpsman. When something goes down, I remember my squad leader told me, "Hey, if there's casualties, you're the squad leader at that point."
Uh-huh. Right.
Um, so it was very there was a lot of emphasis on the combat part of being a corpsman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Second enlistment, when I came back to division, I noticed guys were wearing like longer hair. Uh, the Marine Corps service, we call it going Marine Corps regs. It was almost unheard of
Yeah.
at all. Like you almost never saw it. Um, the PT uniforms, we would be out there wearing our blue and gold Navy
Yeah.
PT uniforms instead of the green on green Marine Corps uniforms.
Huh.
I remember the RP chief, religious program specialist chief, during indoc said like, "Hey, like we're really trying to shift the culture back to the Navy stuff because we are sailors.
Yeah.
We kind of needed to refine that sailor and redefine that sailor identity for the within the First Marine Division. I can only speak to
Yeah.
First Marine Division because that's where I was, but
Right.
they really tried to bring back that Navy culture, and we are still sailors and
Right.
uh, honor that, I guess.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. They wanted you guys to look more like team guys.
I guess
long,
so. Yeah,
long hair, longer hair. Yeah. Yeah. We never cared about. Yeah. That's just a funny aside.
yeah,
That's yeah. I had no idea of that. Of course, I'm a dinosaur. Well, I guess I was a chaplain from '08 to 14, so I
about the
probably
same
saw,
time frame. Yeah,
some of that, but I was always with SEALs, both Def Group and then SEAL Team 18. So I that is a whole nother cultural thing.
sure.
Um, yeah. So anyway, that's cool. Okay. So you talked about you were headed to a combat unit, a Marine combat unit.
Hmm.
Leading up, you talked about getting in boot camp, going through corpsman training, and all that. So let's pick it up where you left off and tell us about your entry and time with the Marines.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, during this time with the Navy, a lot of the deployment opportunities were through what we call IA, individual augmentee.
Right.
Um, and specific to corpsmen was something called the HSAP program, Health Service Augmentee Program.
Mhm.
And basically, is they'd pull you from your shore duty and send you to an operational unit, and in some cases, even to like the Army, like Army units were requesting uh, corpsmen to serve as uh, combat medics, like 68 whiskeys.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was pretty much a sure thing. You were going to go at some point. I'd gotten selected. And I remember, Navy orders are always like, man, they're like 10, 15 pages long.
Yeah.
Never really clear. There's a bunch of like jargon and stuff in there that's like, but I remember it said like I needed to do a TCCC course, which is Tactical Combat Casualty Care course, which is like advanced combat first aid course before checking in.
Right.
And I knew what that was. I didn't like fully. I was like, oh, cool, another course. All right. So I remember going to my first class back on shore duty and showing him my orders, like, hey, like, what's up with this? And he's like, hang on, let me make a call. And of course, all those guys had just come from First Marine Division.
Uh-huh.
It's just up the road, like 45 minutes. And we call them I-5 sailors. We just go back and down I-5.
Right. Right.
So So yeah, they all had hookups and like, hey, there's a class going right now. Like if
Yeah.
you want to drive up there like today, we can get you in the class and like we'll just attach you now.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, so that's what I did. I just kind of
Yeah.
packed my sea bag and we drove up to Camp Pendleton. I showed up and just kind of got right into that class. And the class was actually it's a First Marine Division specific thing called combat trauma management.
Hmm.
And this course is a 2 week long. It's kind of part gut check, like welcome to division.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very like intense PT, like long
Yeah.
runs. Um, and it's also to get kind of adapt you to the stress of like doing your combat training under stress.
For sure.
The instructors kind of shout at you and kind of mess with you a little bit while you're doing your putting on your tourniquets or
Yeah.
battle dressings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it also included a patrol package where we patrolled around and kind of learned the way that the First Marine Division does things. Every regiment's a little different, but
Right.
kind of a general way of
Hmm.
how to set up an LZ, how to just do basic. If you, cause some guys, they're away
Yeah.
from the Marines for 5 or 6 years, and then they're coming back, so it's kind of a
Yeah.
refresher for those guys and spinning us up. And then yeah, so finished that, and my orders say that I'm supposed to go to first light armored reconnaissance, which is for those that don't know, it's an armored vehicle unit. Almost they kind of look like tanks, but they're on wheels essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
They're kind of like the strikers in the army.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go check in over there. They're not expecting us at all. Like they don't know what we're doing there.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, no, like we didn't request any additional corpsman support. And they were leaving soon, like within a couple weeks or something like that. And
Yeah.
so they were not, they were just like, hey, go ahead and go back to we call it the division surgeon's office, which is like where like all the Navy people and are kind of headquartered at in Camp Pendleton.
Yeah.
Um, so I go back over there, and then they're like, oh, like it kind of seemed like the personnel guy just picked a
Yeah.
battalion that was going, and goes like, hey, Third Battalion, 7th Marines, 3-7, you're going 3-7. Okay. So I
Right.
look. There's a couple second classes with me that are kind of groaning. These guys were surgical techs that were previously combat corpsmen.
Right.
They were both OIF early Iraq guys.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, what part of Camp Pendleton is that? And they kind of laughed and they're like, man, that's in 29 Palms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't know. I was like, okay, well, and then so the second classes were like, hey, like leave your car here, like
Yeah.
um you know, we all kind of packed into their car and we drove up to 29 Palms.
Yeah, that's out in
And
the desert for those listening. Couple geographical reference, not to interrupt you, Ernie.
oh, sure.
He said I-5 sailors. So that's Interstate 5. So if you're not familiar with the West Coast, Interstate 5 runs from the Mexican border all the way to Canada up the West Coast. And between San Diego and Oceanside, which is near where Camp Pendleton is, I mean, we were always going up there. Even as SEALs, we were constantly going up there to use their demo range to kill houses, and so there's just this constant back and forth from Navy, which is down at 32nd Street, is the epicenter, but there's tons of bases in San Diego, and then up toward Pendleton, which is it's the largest West Coast Marine base. Um, and then the other thing is like 29 Palms. It's kind of a hellish place, I've heard, to be stationed. It's in the baking hot desert out east, toward Barstow,
Hmm.
California, and it's I've never been to that base, but I've heard no, it's not the most fun place to be stationed. But anyway,
Yeah. So I remember we drive and I'm like, how bad could it be? Like thus far, my Navy experience has been pretty pleasant.
yeah,
Great Lakes wasn't bad. We had Chicago, and
yeah,
I was stationed in San Diego. I was living in Imperial Beach, like man, like I had it made.
yeah, yeah, really,
At the more and more we got in the desert, like the more depressed I felt. I was like,
yeah,
oh man, like, and I came to like it eventually, but at first I
yeah,
was like, oh man, this is totally different.
yeah,
And Seventh Marine Regiment is the one regiment of the First Marine Division that's not in Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
Everything else is in Camp Pendleton, but Seventh Marines, they moved, I think, back in the 80s or 90s to 29 Palms,
Right.
and they take a lot of pride in that.
Mhm.
They're Desert Marines.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we get there, um, and then we check in with the senior chief, who's in charge of the Navy personnel office, um, in 29 Palms, and he's not expecting us either. He doesn't know what we're doing there.
It's
He,
always pointing in different directions all the time.
oh yeah, like nobody had any clue what we were doing. But he's like, well, I'm not going to send y'all back to San Diego. Hey, you know, go ahead and check in with the chief in 3-7. And I remember the first thing he told us, though, which is kind of ominous. He's like, do not listen to these Lance corporals that think that they're senior Lance corporals. He's like, there's no such rank. Do not
Yeah.
let them push y'all around.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Why would they?
Yeah. Right.
You
Like
know?
these two other questions.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
was like, okay. Like I kind of kept that in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And so we show up to the 3-7 Battalion aid station. Um, we meet the chief and the medical officers, and that they're happy to have us. I guess the chief had known that he'd requested us, but maybe that
Yeah.
doesn't go through the senior chief of NAVPERS. But
Uh-huh.
so yeah, they basically paired us off. There was there's 10 of us, so 2 people to India company, 2 people to Kilo company, 2 people to Lima company, which I was in Lima.
Hmm.
I was one of those two. 2 to weapons company, and 2 to headquarters and services company. And those were the 2 senior second classes. They were
Okay.
going to let those guys kind of
Yeah.
um, go. Well, what they thought was going to be kind of a chill assignment in headquarters, but they actually ended up getting in pretty heavy combat as well.
There's no kidding.
Um, yeah. So, but the rest of us were all E3s, and I think there was a couple E4s, but mainly E3s.
Uh-huh.
Um, okay, cool. Then from there we had a senior line corpsman who was an E4, that had like an Iraq veteran. Um, and he had kind of like, hey, okay, you're with me. You're gonna check in with me every day. Between here, come here to the aid station for sick call every day. Um, and then you release to your platoons and kind of do whatever your platoon's doing. So they take us down to the first sergeant to check in with the first sergeant, and he's real bleak about everything. He's just like, hey, we're glad you guys are here. But as you know, like this is going to be and we didn't know, we knew we were going to Afghanistan, but we knew nothing else. And he was just kind of like, hey, like we're going to have casualties out there. So,
Yeah.
we want you guys' head in the game.
Yeah, totally.
And, it was very, very, and he was a Anglico guy, I believe. So, he'd done some cool things with the Marine, the
Yeah.
Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. So
Uh-huh.
they're all jump qualified, like Marines. They do some cool stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and he was just very, very bleak and kind of honest with us. Like, hey, like you guys don't have a lot of time to get trained, but get all the training you can, and just get ready because we're leaving in 2 months. So from there, we meet the squad leaders. I meet mine, and I think I told you about this. He had requested more riflemen.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I think he requested 3 riflemen, and he got a corpsman for now, and then we got 2 more guys came up. And so he was kind of like, hey man, like I'm glad to have you, but I requested, grunts.
Right.
Um, so we're going to train you. We're going to cross train you as a rifleman.
Yeah.
And they had kind of told us a little about that stuff in my training, but it was just kind of like, yeah, you might have to sometime defend yourself, but your Marines will take care of you. But no,
Yeah,
this was
right.
like, hey, no, you're going to cover
No.
your own sectors,
Yeah, we want another shooter out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I
So
had no
did you
choice but to be like, okay, yeah.
so they send you to the range and teach you some long gun principles and
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So they said, okay, this is your squad and this is your team leader, right? And I don't know, are we okay to use names or anything here? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So
like one thing I'll just say for the Patrick and I try to do is like if it's something pejorative or negative about somebody,
Oh, sure.
we'll leave the name out, or yeah. But if it's just a matter of fact, here's how it happened, and nothing that could
No,
come
no,
back on
yeah.
them. Yeah, but I just yeah.
Yeah, no, so they introduced me to my team leader, is this guy named Corporal TC Holbert.
Mm.
And he kind of casually is like, sitting there on the smoke pit, smoking a cigarette, and he's like, "Yeah, guy, good to have you. Like, come by my room later. I'll show you how to set up your flak and your gear, how we do it, because every squad does everything the same, and just in case guys
Yeah,
down, you can where his first aid, his blowout kit is, or
yeah,
his magazines, everything, right?
right.
Okay, and he goes, "Yeah, and I was a doc too, so we'll go over your med bag as well." And I was like, "Whoa!" And then come to find out, he was a Navy corpsman as well. He did 6 years
Wow.
um, with the same unit with 3-7, got out, rejoined the Marines, and then was in the same unit again, but a different company.
Yeah.
So I had this guy as a team leader, so it was pretty cool to have him there, and he really like made sure that I was both tactically and like medically
Right.
good. And I remember like even the medical officers, like I think he was kind of like thorn in their side a little bit, because I remember like when we'd have downtime, he would send me to the aid station. He'd be like, "Hey, go see if the battalion surgeon has a Mosby's physical examination guide. We're gonna go over some stuff." As
Wow.
a corporal, as a Marine
Yeah.
corporal. And I
Yeah.
remember like our medical officers were like, "What?" Like kind of rolling their eyes at that. But
Right.
it was all in. Everyone was
Yeah.
kind of working
Yeah.
towards the same goal. You
Right.
know.
Did
So
you just a quick question for you? Things are popping into my head. I was just curious. So for our listeners out there, like in a combat unit, everybody has a med kit, right? Everybody,
mhm,
not just the corpsman. The corpsman usually has a more enhanced med kit,
sure.
but we all have a med kit and stuff that's required. And the way it's supposed to work is if you go down, your buddy or hopefully the corpsman or medic is going to come use your med kit,
hmm
unless there's something that you don't have that is more advanced in the corpsman or medic's med kit. So you always had to have everything squared away and everything in place, so that because you don't want to be scrambling and scratching your head and going, well, where's this, in the middle of somebody bleeding out or something. So that's kind of the way it worked. I
Yeah.
assume, yeah, your med kit was probably a little bigger,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
average grunt med kit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and actually, because this squad didn't have a corpsman before,
Hmm.
um, they just had the one corpsman. My buddy Neil Zacagny. He was the one corpsman for all three squads previous to me, and then at this point there was two of us. He was in third squad, I was in first squad, and second squad we kind of covered down. Or if the machine guns were attached to us, the machine gun corpsman would cover down, or that's how we would kind
Yeah.
of do it. But since at that one point it was just him, the Marine Corps has a program called the Combat Lifesaver Program, where it's like a week long course where you basically get a watered down version of our tactical combat casualty care. You basically learn everything we know, but you just don't give meds essentially.
Yeah.
And so once you have that qualification, you actually get a more advanced bag too.
Yeah.
Uh, so usually
Gotcha.
we had two guys that had those like big, like they're kind of like
Hmm.
they like work sling bags.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, a lot of times they wouldn't really take them out just because it's just more stuff to carry.
Yeah.
But basically, everybody except for our like squad our saw gunners or squad automatic weapon
Yeah.
gunners carried that,
Yeah.
or they had access to a combat lifesaver bag. And
Right.
then yeah, I had a much bigger, more kind of like robust bag.
Right.
I went through all kinds of different configurations as I got more experienced.
Yeah.
At first I had a big old bag that just kind of was a hindrance, but as I got more and more tactically proficient, I kind of scaled it down to what I really needed.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of funny. You can always tell like a new guy, they have all this gear on,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
as time goes on, they're carrying kind of the bare minimum, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but
Cool.
yeah. Mhm.
So how did when you started getting into going out on operations, how tell us about, walk us through that.
Yeah. So yeah, like it was about two. So we go to the range. Believe it was an unknown distance qualification
Mm,
shoot,
yeah. Yeah.
and I go. It's kind of funny. I go to check out my weapon. I don't know what I'm getting. I
Yeah.
presumed an M4 because that's what we had in school.
Right.
And they kind of gave us these. It was an M16, but like with all the M4 like furniture on it. Like I had
Yeah.
a PEC laser on, like laser and light on there, an ACOG scope,
Yeah.
like Ford grip broomstick, and
Yeah.
but it was on an old M16,
Oh
and
yeah.
because I mean we were kind of late to the show, so that we kind
Yeah.
of got what we got, and in every other range experience I'd had, the buses kind of pick us up and all right, everyone get on the bus, we go to the range. It's like nope, line up and we're hiking.
Oh yeah. Well, oh yeah, yeah. That's actually good preparation.
Yeah,
You'd
I mean
rather
it's
be on a bus,
infantry.
but what you're going to go out in the field, you're gonna be doing a lot of walking and shooting.
Yeah, and I couldn't complain. I looked at some of the guys, like the guys carrying the big old, rocket launchers and heavy guns, heavy machine
Yeah.
guns, and sniper rifles, and all this other stuff. I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. I
Yeah.
got it all right. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I got to go through one of those ranges, and then we did one of an actual fire and movement range. Man, which is honestly looking back pretty dangerous considering I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
guys were kind of just like, hey, like if you're gonna stand up from going from the prone, you got to call your movement, and
Right. Yeah.
coordinate. Um, and so I was learning all this stuff on the fly. I was a
Sure.
pretty good shooter. I would say above average at least
Yeah.
as a shooter. I picked up how to use the ACOG pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think I remember hearing on what either yours or Patrick's stories, like once I kind of proved I had a skill set outside of my medical stuff, the guys had really come like, okay, like Doc can shoot, like good, like
Yeah.
my value definitely like, well, as a corpsman,
Yeah.
we're well treated, for sure, more than the
Yeah.
average grunt, but
For
they still
sure.
are a little wary, of
Yeah.
a new guy coming in.
A
But once I kind of,
sailor. You're a
yeah,
sailor boy. Yeah.
especially,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But once I proved I could shoot, I think I was kind of considered more of an asset than a
Yeah.
liability, which is, what you want.
Well,
Yeah.
what I know of Marines and their emphasis on shooting and being a rifleman, your street cred goes up pretty quick when you can hit a target because
Oh yeah.
that.
Especially like, at 500 yards.
Oh yeah, that's a. I've always said that is the most amazing thing. That's a long shot, and for at least back in my day, they were doing it with iron sights.
Hmm.
And for a 223 or 5.56 millimeter round go that far, that's a decent shot to get it even
Yeah.
silhouette. Yeah.
Yeah. We shot him with iron sights in school, but with the ACOG, it was
Yeah.
considerably easier.
Yeah. Way easier. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah. I mean, like we pushed it as much as we could. And we fortunately had a range coach in my squad. He was our squad designated marksman with a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
So I had him like in my,
Nice.
he was the other team leader, but we all worked together, and
Sure.
he really made sure that I had that down, and all the weapons manipulations and all that. So I went down range feeling like pretty confident
Good.
as a shooter at least.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we fly out from March Air Force Base in
Mhm.
California. I can't remember like exactly the city that's near, but
It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And
yeah,
I've been there, but yeah, it's
yeah, we flew from there to I think Bangor, Maine, then to Germany, and finally to Afghanistan, or Kyrgyzstan, then Afghanistan. And I remember like in the Marine Corps they have what they call the Lance Corporal Underground, right? Where like it's like a pseudo intelligence network coming from a bunch of E3s.
oh yeah.
And
Oh boy.
I would say it's probably 75 to 80% correct,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
that 20% they get wrong is pretty major.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember
Most
like,
dramatic stuff they'll get wrong.
oh yeah, they're like, hey, like we might have to like, I think on your story, like, or you're like, we might have to fight off this plane, like
Yeah.
we were like, oh man. And I remember even one of the sergeants that was kind of some of the infantry sergeants go to security forces training before the infantry.
Yeah.
It's a different contract option, and he was kind of one of those guys that hadn't it was his first deployment too,
Yeah.
and he was like, man, I think I can hear a firefight. We're like, oh no, man. The door opens and it was a zeroing range for
Yeah,
guys to zero their rifles on the base,
sure.
And, it was Camp Leatherneck, Afghanistan. Pretty tame, honestly. Uh,
You remember what province that was in?
I think it's Helmand.
Helmet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's Helmand province. We were slated to initially operate in Nimros province. We did maybe for like a month or two. Um, it wasn't as kinetic as they thought. I mean, there was definitely a couple firefights out there, but most of our action was for sure in Helmand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the first couple weeks out there, it was pretty tame. I mean, as it should be, I guess. When you're first kind of getting in, that we did a lot of
Yeah.
classes and
Right.
how to use like deployment specific equipment, like mine countermeasures, like on the vehicles and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But we did a lot of like drills on off time. Like Marine Corps is really big on like we call hip pocket classes. Like, hey, we're gonna practice speed reloads for hours on end, and
Right.
hey, boxing and kick a class. I'd teach how to use tourniquets and
Yeah.
stick IVs. They always loved
Yeah.
sticking IVs.
Did you have your guys stick IVs?
I
Yeah.
did,
Yeah,
yeah.
we did it like weekly. Our corpsman had us hook up a successful IV once a week just to keep us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say my guys were that proficient.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, it's just I would say like, you have a pretty varying level of proficiency just in the
yeah.
basic infantry. But some of them, especially the more senior guys, like they understood the gravity of the hey, I might have to really do this.
Yeah.
And other ones just want to stab each other, so
Yeah. Yeah.
and they
One
always
thing
kind of
sometimes maybe civilian listeners might not realize is that it'll be ideal if you get hit or something happens and you get hurt, to have a corpsman or medic be there. But there are many, many times when it's just you're next to your buddy, and for
sure.
whatever reason, you could be pinned down. It could be who knows. You can't get the corpsman over there, or at least quick enough sometimes.
Yeah, until I get there,
Yeah,
these guys might take care of themselves. Yeah.
right. So anyway,
Which later in the story, like my guys did, and they did a great job. But yeah, so we really put an emphasis on getting everybody medically proficient.
nice.
And we were lucky enough. I think I told you before, but our medical officer was actually a former team guy,
Oh yeah,
um,
that's right.
and he actually was assigned to our company,
Uh-huh.
so he held a lot of training with us. I think he was actually an 18 Delta instructor
Wow.
when he was enlisted. So
Yeah.
he trained us off of their book, kind of unofficially. And man, I just remember like the scenarios and everything that he would throw at us, and we
Yeah.
would work through it. And if we failed it, we'd do it again.
Yeah.
And so we got a lot of training done in the first month before we headed out.
Yeah.
They assigned us to this place called Delaram.
Uh-huh.
Um, we get on the bird to go out, and we go out in platoons. And I remember our sergeant telling us, like, "Hey, like pack as if we're gonna be living pretty austerely, like
Hmm.
sleeping bags and that whole lot, like living in the trenches."
Hmm.
Um, we landed. Um, uh, Another platoon of Marines met us there and walked us in to the compound, and luckily it was not that way. It was pretty nice camp on Camp Delaram.
Yeah.
Good chow halls. They had internet and like stuff like that. It was not terrible.
Yeah.
Um, but it was at that point it was time for business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we got our first raid like 2 or 3 days later, and I went
Wow.
on that raid. We rehearsed, and luckily there was like a little like kind of kill house type scenario to kind of
Hmm.
practice on.
Right.
And so we did a couple dry runs on that, and ready for my first mission. Um, so at that point I'm just reading every
Yeah.
medical manual I can. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
scary. Honestly, a lot. I'm like kind of questioning myself, like, man, is this really what I wanted? But at this point, it's too late. Where I'm
Yeah.
going on that raid.
Yeah.
Um, we go on this raid. It's at night. Fortunately, I think Patrick's kind of stories kind of happens a lot of times. Having that element of surprise kind of prevents a lot of the violence from happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
The need to necessarily engage. So like that we didn't really actually end up firing on that first raid. we kind of snatched and grabbed the guy and got him back to base.
Yeah.
But man, I'll remember that first time outside the wire, and I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking everybody's Taliban in my mind, my
Yeah, I
kind of
know.
dumb mind. Everyone I see is Taliban. I think they're Taliban. I remember radioing in like, "Hey, I think I see." We call them MAM, military age male, and my sergeant's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, doc, that's anyone from like 14 to like 50, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, your imagination kind of runs wild when you're first starting out hitting the ground in a foreign country where there's enemy combatants. It's like it's like the monsters under your bed when you're a kid.
sure,
But yeah,
yeah,
and that's part of it. The real balance I think I've seen and I've heard Patrick talk about and other vets is not getting too complacent because after a while you're like, oh, this okay, same old thing.
yeah,
The moment you let your guard down, then something could happen. But when you
and it
first get
will,
there,
yeah.
you're hyper aware.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We thought everything was an IED. We thought everything was, especially at nighttime with MVGs. And I was not very experienced with MVGs at first. I was pretty clumsy, but with some training, some remedial training, I guess you could
Yeah,
say. Like we went on runs wearing MVGs.
yeah,
Like, hey,
yeah,
if you fall, you fall, but you'll learn to learn
yeah,
to use this equipment. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, on my first raid, like just being super careful and and I guess that's really how you should be a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
But yeah, it was mainly vehicle mounted ops at first,
Uh-huh.
man, hit a lot of IEDs at the first couple months. Uh, nothing too crazy as far as like trauma, but guys were starting to get taken out of action from just traumatic brain injuries.
Getting rattled. Yeah,
Yeah, and I remember like they actually sent in like Navy medicine. Like it was at least full birds came out and they kind of gave us classes on how to conduct the MACE exam for
yeah,
concussions. And I remember even our PA, the team guy,
yeah.
he was like, "Whoa, okay, this is he." The way he would do it was he'd have them count change,
Uh-huh.
and see if they could count change, and that was a good example. And they like,
Right.
well, you really want to do it this way, and so we got a lot of education on that stuff because we were losing vehicles like left and right.
Yeah.
That there's first couple months in Nimroz province. Um, some of the other companies were getting into actual firefights quite a bit. It didn't really happen with us. It was mainly just a lot of IEDs and like learning how to immediate action with
Yeah.
vehicles,
Right.
setting up um, perimeters and
Yeah.
sweeping minesweepers and everything like that. Um, Eventually, we got called to detach from our battalion, Lima Company. We detached from our battalion. We went to 3-6. We became part of 3-6 India Company um, in Marja.
Hmm.
So we went to Marja. This is Marja was the hotbed at the time. We set up in this area called Sistani, which I think is just outside Marja. We were like basically setting up a blocking position,
Yeah.
and we were there to basically prevent the Taliban from like they think that's where they were resting and refitting.
Yeah.
So we were there for that area to try and intercept them, and we had a couple raids there that were similar.
Yeah.
Nothing ever kind of went off as like far as firefights there, but did have a couple more brave. They're much more brave fighters over there.
Yeah.
Like they'd clack off IEDs on us and stuff like that. Fortunately, no casualties there, but we're also working with the Afghan army guys the first time, our
Yeah.
partner forces. Um,
When you were doing the blocking positions, do you know, you may not have known, was there another special ops unit going in to get people and you were looking for basically squirters and to form.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was they had some recon Marines out there.
Okay.
And also there was some NSW Navy Special Warfare elements. You can
Yeah.
see them on our in our trucks. We have this little thing. It looks like a little laptop called the Blue Force Tracker,
Hmm.
and you can see what units are around, and
Yeah.
you can actually kind of like you can text message them and stuff like that, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you need help, and yeah, we would see NSW teams and and recon. floating around out there. And you're like, oh, what are they up to?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah.
then every now and then they would use us too. Guys like, hey, like
Sure.
we need you guys to go on this raid.
Yeah. Need shooters.
Yeah, that was always great training. I'm not gonna lie, it was not super kinetic yet.
Hmm.
Um, and that for me, it was like, hey, we're gonna get doc spun up on patrols, like foot patrols. We weren't
Yeah.
really using our vehicles anymore. We were going on these long range patrols.
Yeah.
Um, we were doing, a listening post and observation in posts.
Hmm.
Just doing a lot of like core, like ground combat stuff and counterinsurgency.
Right.
Where specifically me and our sergeant and our interpreter would go and speak with the locals. And I'd set up what we call med reps, where I would go and take care of basically conduct sick call for the
Right.
locals,
Yeah.
and
Hearts
kind of
and
build a
minds.
rapport. And
Yeah.
I would say it worked really well out there. They loved
Yeah.
us,
Yeah. I
well,
bet.
at least to our faces.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and it was almost like they knew though when the units were switching out, because whenever 3-6 was leaving and 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, an East Coast unit came in, is when they started getting bold and shooting at us. And like, my first firefight, happened out there in a field. Like we've been through this field a million times, and then someone decided to shoot at us, you know. And man, that was a unique feeling the first time.
Sure.
I remember hitting the deck and like kind of like fumbling for my weapon and being like, where are these guys? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing things I knew to do. Like, I'm not looking through my scope. Like, I'm just looking, and like
Yeah.
look through. Our sergeant kind of knew it would happen though. He's like, hey, like look through your scope and like try and find this guy.
Right. Right.
And fortunately, like I was kind of in the middle of the pack of the squad, and the front of the squad actually hit the guy's motorcycle, and we were able to capture him without having to kill him or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was kind of amateur hour for what we would have later, though.
Yeah.
Um, these guys were not real Taliban fighters. We don't think they were just like
Right.
insurgents, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, but once that other battalion had come in, they had called us and said, "Hey, um, Sangin, the Sangin Valley, is really kicking off. Kilo India and Weapons Company are taking casualties like crazy. Like
Well,
we're going back."
yeah.
And and at first, like in my little E3 Lance Corporal Underground community, we were kind of like, "Oh, I'm sure it is." Like y'all said, Marja was crazy, and it wasn't. And like
Yeah.
Nimros Province was crazy, and it wasn't. But like you could just tell by the general tone of the leadership, like we were about to get into some heavy stuff. And like the classes that we were going through, like were more often, and they started switching people around in squads. Like they were preparing for like some rough stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we got ready to pack up from our little patrol bases in Marja once we were relieved, and we headed down to the Singing Valley. And I'll never forget, we flew in. It's green. It's not desert. We called it Afghanistan because it looked like Vietnam. You
Yeah.
know, but we fly in. They call it the green zone. That's what other people call it. And the second our bird touches down, these Royal Marines storm our bird, start throwing our gear off. Like, get out of here! Like,
Yeah. Like no,
get
no
this bird
shit.
gone.
Yeah.
And they told us to be working with the Brits, but we didn't know. Like, these guys were intense.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know, they were like, get off the bird and like grab your gear and like they got to get this bird out of here. Like, y'all are about to
Yeah.
die.
Heck yeah.
You know, and
Did you say they were Royal Marines?
yeah, Royal Marine Commandos.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're tough dudes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we were basically we were there to work with them and then relieve them is what we
Right.
were there for.
Right.
Um, man, and we had to totally change our TTPs, like our tactics and procedures, to what they were doing, because like they had been in that battle space for I think at least 5 years, um, and what they were doing was working. They were taking casualties for sure, but we went from doing like kind of more advanced formations on patrols to just one single file ranger filing because there were so many IEDs everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, they told us that like they get attacked on the daily, the posts get attacked every day. And they told us that every headquarters and services Marine that was there had earned their combat action ribbon because
Yeah.
like everyone, they were getting attacked every day.
Yeah.
And the master gunnery sergeant told us, like, hey, like, if you guys hear contact, like, docs, go to the aid station, Marines, jump online, like, and on the berms and start firing.
Yeah.
And the tone changed very fast, and we're already 4 months in here. And it was like, hey, like, this is real war now. It was
Yeah.
very, very, very sudden. Um, so at first we're kind of just hanging out on the base and getting acclimated to the different climate, and the Marines are helping on post. I'm in the aid station working with the Royal Marine medics,
Hmm.
um, you know, helping with trauma. And we saw quite a bit, gunshot wounds, blast wounds, all kinds of stuff. I was getting like a lot of real hands-on training, not training, but
Yeah. Hands
patient
on.
care, patient care. Yeah, yeah. So I felt pretty confident in my medicine at that point, Um, and we had some instances before then, but this is every day now. This is my life now. Um, and eventually they're like, "Hey, all right, Lima, y'all are pushing out now." And I'll never forget. We were. It was like our final like big push to push the Taliban out of those positions, and we left. I remember leaving that patrol base, and the Brits were pumping us up, like, "All right, lads, like, go get you some," like, this
Yeah.
war, like, go out there and kill them, And I'll never forget running down that ECP entry control point, and like just hearing my heartbeat in my ears, just like and breathing. It's all I hear is boop, boop, and like
Yeah.
running down there, and Taliban shooting at us. It was like our first, like, this is real combat,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and had a couple guys unfortunately get shot. One guy got shot in the leg. We were able to get him fixed up pretty quickly. It's pretty minor. As far as, like, it's better than stepping on an IED, I would always say. But
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah, we got him treated and on a bird and out of there. Um, and that was our first, like, oh, one of our guys got shot, like shot, not like little,
Yeah.
not to make light of TBIs, but like,
Right.
real trauma, um, and it kind of just was what it was. We kind of had to keep pushing. Um, we took over a compound, and basically, where we did what we call dwell ops, where we lived in that little compound. We did 4 hours of post, 4 hours of patrols, and like 4 hours of rest. And we just continue that, and just patrols every single day. And sure enough, they would attack every day. Like,
Yeah.
like most time, almost kind of harassing.
Yeah.
You know,
It sounds a lot like, did you see the documentary? We talked about it on the podcast called Restrepo.
yeah, kinda.
Uh
Yeah, it wasn't as built up as Restrepo was, but yeah, we
yeah.
were kind of in the like it was similar, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
we weren't
not
like
it
in the mountains, but yeah.
right. It sounds like it. I mean, they were in the Korengal Valley. I think it was Wardak province or I'm not, don't quote me on that, but
Yeah.
it was the same thing. There were engagements every day and getting, it was like almost you can set your watch by it,
Yeah, yeah. And
you
every
know.
time that they would attack, we would send out a counter patrol,
Yeah.
to set up the counter ambush.
Right. Right.
And it would be like, "Hey doc, come on, you're coming." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, right.
um, and I would say it's just like the experience level. It was just like I feel like I got years of combat experience in 7 months.
Yeah, we kind of
Um,
did.
and yeah, um, eventually we lost a couple guys, no KIA, but several wounded, from IEDs mainly.
Mhm.
You know, um, Fortunately, all my guys that were wounded out there, they're all doing very well today. Like, um, but we were we call us Lucky Lima on that note. We were very, very fortunate to not have any KIAs, but
Right.
several wounded. Eventually they say, like, hey, you guys have done your time out in, like, I guess the bush, you could say.
Yeah.
They went ahead and pulled us back to Fob Jackson, which is that big base I was talking about earlier we flew into.
Right.
And we were kind of winding down. We were getting ready to go home. This is September.
Yeah.
We're leaving in October. so we were kind of short timers, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I remember we got all this mail like at once. It was
Yeah.
like we just hadn't had mail. Like I remember like
Right.
my parents saying like that they remember they kind of the chaplain and like the what do they call them, like the family advocate. I can't. It's like the person that talks to the families like constantly. I can't remember what their name is.
Yeah, it's not an ombudsman.
It's the Navy's, yeah, the Marine Corps
Yeah.
version of that, like
Yeah,
family
yeah.
life. I can't remember what they call them.
Family liaison.
Yeah, yeah. They had said like, hey, like don't be surprised if you don't hear from them for a while,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. And we got all this mail in, right? And it was like a party. We were like
Yeah.
excited,
Oh yeah.
And but then something just kind of to me, I was like, this is too nice, Like I don't know about this,
Right.
like something just was foreboding about it. And then sure
Yeah.
enough, our sergeant comes in and he's not like he kind of the tone shifts, and he's like, hey, like first squad, I gotta talk to y'all. We were going out for one final push, one final mission the next day. And it was different from our usual thing of like, patrols, short range
Hmm.
patrols, security patrols is what we called them usually, or coin patrols. He's like, this is a movement to contact. Like we're going into a fight tomorrow.
Hmm.
Um, with 3 different objectives. Um, I guess the deal was it was supposed to be an election day.
Yeah.
Um, so the Taliban was trying to prevent people from voting, and so supposedly, unfortunately as a corpsman, I didn't really get a lot of the intel or how or why. It was just we were going for me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we were ready for a big fight the next day. It was like all of Lima Company, like all of us, like no one was really staying in reserve. The Brits were holding down the base security. Um, some of the Brits were coming with us. All of the Afghans were coming. It was like a NATO, they called it a Tiger team. I'm not really sure what that means, but it was like a multinational force
Right.
was coming out to, um, and yeah, it was like, hey, we're stepping off at 07, and it's a movement to contact. We hit the first objective. A couple pot shots at us. Nothing really too bad had happened. Second objective, though, we set up security. It's my squad, first squad, and third squad. We were the assaulting element, and the second squad was support by fire, essentially. So they were providing covering fire for us
Right.
2 squads that were assaulting. Um, we set up on the second objective, and our engineers are like, "Hey, there's IEDs on there. There's IEDs. Like, all like this building's laced with IEDs." One of our Afghan guys was like, I'll never forget. He said, "No IED," and kicked it, blew himself up, like lost both of his legs.
Yeah.
Um, the dude next to him, other Afghan, lost one leg and like covered in shrapnel. Um, and then and then like a couple of the Marines nearby took some shrapnel as well. The third squad leader came out, had frag in his face, and he's like, "Doc, like," he was like rattled, like big time. He's like, "Doc, you got to go in there and help." Doc Z, which is the other corpsman, Cagney, like they're messed up in there. Like you just need to go in there. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh man." And so I'm like, okay. One of the British Marines things that they told us to do was always carry a hard litter, a hard stretcher, like a pulled stretcher.
Right.
So, and I had this thing like shoved into a rucksack, so I pulled that out. We go in there, and then I'm like clockwork. They start raining fire on us, just like So I've got like 4, like the 2 engineers and the 2 ANA guys are like urgent casualties, and I've got maybe like 5 or 6 walking wounded.
Wow.
Um,
Your
so
hands full.
yeah, yeah, and then fortunately, all that medical training, I go in there, and my wounded guys that are walking wounded are tending to the urgent guys.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And man, I'll never, that probably was my proudest moment, seeing those
Yeah.
guys putting on tourniquets, like they're concussed, putting on
Yeah.
tourniquets and everything like that. And so I went and took care of the double amputee, the Afghan guy, and we got that was pretty easy to get him, at least get the tourniquets on him, get him out.
Hmm.
And then the 2 engineers it was kind of just shrapnel wounds to the legs. We got them they were both like conscious and everything like that. So we were able to get them. One of them walked out, the other one we carried out. But man, like the rest of the Marines were engaged. They were like heavily engaged. Uh, they said it was a 4-hour firefight. It seemed like to me like 30 minutes.
Yeah, it
You
can
know,
be
the
weird.
time really distorted. Yeah.
Yeah, time really can be weird.
Yeah, it really distorted. You know, we got those guys out pretty quickly though. First platoon came in and took all of the, like our sister platoon took all the casualties out and kind of reinforced us.
Yeah,
I remember seeing like that their corpsman was a third class, and he kind of like just gave some like comfort and assurance. You know, like he was there with us. He's like, hey, you guys did a good job,
yeah,
but now go fight with your boys. And
yeah,
so because both of us were like, what do we do now? We were both kind of shook.
yeah.
Like, you guys got to go fight now. And so we did. We hopped into the fight, and eventually, man, we were dangerously low on ammo. I was handing my mags out to my shooters. That's their job. I kept rounds in my gun, of course, too. But
Yeah,
if they needed ammo, they were getting it first. Like especially
yeah,
designated marksmen and all that stuff.
yeah, sure.
Man, to the point, I remember I was like, "Oh, I got my pistol left." Like this is not good. You
Yeah,
know?
it's no worse feeling than thinking you're out of ammo or
No,
getting
yeah,
close.
it was
That is
scary,
horrifying. Yeah,
terrifying. Yeah, yeah. And I remember being like, "Is this it?"
yeah,
Like, because they weren't hitting us, but we were running out of ammo. And luckily, we had a forward observer artillery officer with us, and he's like, "Hey, everyone, grab some cover because I have a 500-pounder coming in."
yeah,
And I did, and the best as I could. I remember just kind of like
yeah.
hugging the dirt.
Hey, yeah. Open your mouth. What is it? Cover your
Yeah,
ears.
yeah.
Brace
Oh
for
my,
impact.
oh my gosh. And they're like, it's danger close, because these guys were shooting at us from across the tree line. I want to say 100 meters. It could have been more. It could have been less. I don't really remember. Um, Man, and I remember it's just like the ground just shook, and it was just kind of like hell for like 10 seconds. And then I remember waking up, and then this is the terrible thing. And we learned about traumatic brain injuries later. All the guys that were concussed from before are now way more concussed, because we found out later it's like every additional traumatic brain injury
Makes it
is
worse.
exponential to the last,
Yeah.
especially if you're under 26 years old, which all of these guys were.
Wow.
So now I've got more walking wounded that need to go.
Right.
And so so I have to coordinate their medevac. And so, including my squad leader, who was kind of our sense of comfort. He was our
Right.
sergeant, and he was the one that always was there. And always, he's actually still in. He's a master sergeant now. So shout out to Mike Monday out there. But
Hmm.
man, he was kind of our source of comfort. But now he was wounded. So I had to get him out. So now all the corporals are in charge. All the sergeants are out of the fight. All
Wow.
3 sergeants. Um, and then there's a couple staff sergeants, like the platoon sergeant. And then we had some civil affairs group guys with us too that were like just there as attachments.
Right.
So the show's being run by a bunch of corporals,
Yeah.
and one gunny, our company gunnery sergeant was with us too. Who was an awesome dude. I think he was former recon or something like that. So he was a tough fighter too.
Yeah.
But he was like, "Hey, I'm just here as a trigger puller, like
Yeah.
it's you guys' show." And so fortunately, our lieutenant was still good though. And so after that, we did our battle damage assessment after all the casualties were gone. Man, it's horrific, battle damage assessment. I'll never forget. Like, just terrible. Like that, what that kind of bomb will do, to
Oh
a human.
yeah. Jeez, to our own people
Yeah,
and to both.
yeah,
Works both ways.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Luckily, like, we didn't have any like trauma from our own side of the bomb besides like the TBIs.
Right.
But man, and then from there it was like, hey, air's got it from here. You guys hunker down.
Mm.
So we did. We hunkered down, set up a bunch of basically took shifts. Everyone was just so rattled. We took shifts filling sandbags and fortifying our position, and
Yeah.
then the air just kind of took over from there.
Yeah.
And that was our last operation of that deployment. We went home on my 21st birthday.
Wow.
Yeah,
Pretty young.
yeah. So,
Well,
uh,
that's fascinating. I'd like to talk a little more about it. We're coming up on an hour, but time
Oh,
flies when we're doing this. Like we always say, yeah. I think I have like a bunch more questions. How about if you're willing, we'll push it to another episode.
sure.
Talk about how you decompress from that, getting out, and sort of your transition into civilian life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because we yeah, I mean, and I just didn't want to stop. We usually go for 30 to 40 minutes, but I was that was really interesting what you're getting into, so I didn't want to cut it off too prematurely. But yeah, this will make a great episode, and then we can come back and do a third one.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds great.
Is that good with you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Operator Syndrome. Really appreciate it.